I'm with Marko Navala, who is responsible for a lot of our supply chain innovations that are happening. And so I want to talk to him a little bit about the state of supply chain and manufacturing and what's going on. So Marko, welcome.
Well, thank you, Drew, and thank you for joining us. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So tell me, what's going on in the state of manufacturing today, right? I mean, what's happening? What are some of the big moves?
Yeah, Drew. Hey, there's simply put, a lot, right?
A lot, yeah.
A lot. Yep. Supply chains are getting more global.
Yep.
There's a proliferation of SKUs that companies are manufacturing.
Okay. All right.
A lot more localization. And most importantly, life cycles of products are just getting shorter and shorter.
Okay.
And that is really having a major impact on manufacturing.
Okay.
And in order to stay relevant, in order to service the customer base,
Sure.
companies are really looking how to be faster,
Right.
in terms of delivering products to market.
Okay. How does this relate to like just-in-time manufacturing? You know, you got short cycles, and we all know about just-in-time manufacturing for lean manufacturing. So how does that play? It seems like that would make it even more difficult.
Yeah. Well, Drew, actually, just-in-time is almost like a little bit of how things used to do.
Okay.
That is how
All
they
right.
used to work. Today, it's not even exception-based. It's basically the notion is you have to constantly adapt to changing requirements, to changing customer
All right.
needs,
Yep.
right? So it's really kind of outside-in approach.
Okay.
Understand the demand at the point where this demand originates.
Right.
And very importantly, talking about the speed, trying to really replicate that signal throughout the entire supply chain.
Okay.
And that is really a challenge, right? So it's really, how do I make sure that if I'm introducing a
Right.
product, I know as soon as possible that my entire supply chain will be able to respond.
Okay,
right?
so I mean that sounds like a big challenge, right? So what are companies doing to succeed in that today? How are companies, effectively meeting that challenge right now?
Yeah, that's a couple of ways, but it's really all about connecting,
Okay.
collaborating. So the notion of business network comes really important,
I see.
right?
Okay.
The notion of being smart in terms of intelligent, proactive,
Got it.
prescriptive in terms of decision making, trying to automate a lot of the decision making, right? The idea is to go towards what is called cognitive supply chain.
Okay.
Do I have the platforms in place that can really make decisions for me?
Okay.
But that is predicated upon, again, having all of the information for pretty much most of the supply chain.
Okay,
yeah.
so it sounds like technology plays a big role in this. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on some of the technology that you're seeing and building into Ariba that is helping with that?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just give you one idea here, and something that we are working with, and that is blockchain. So
Okay.
you may have heard about blockchain. It's really
Sure,
a
absolutely.
trust protocol, something that essentially enables communities to evolve, right?
Okay.
So we have the world's largest business network, Ariba network, and that brings together 3.5 or so companies, right?
Right.
But it's not the only
3.5
network.
million companies.
3.5 million
yeah, let's be clear.
companies. Thank
More
you.
than 3.5 companies. yes.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And then but it's not the only community
Yeah.
of connected enterprises, right?
Right.
So what we're trying to look with blockchain, how can we extend the value that we bring to other communities
Okay,
through
yep.
this technology, but also bring the value of other communities into our captive audience, into
Okay.
our community. And by that way, we address the need for speed, right?
Right.
In order to basically have more transparency into information flows that result in better and faster decision making.
Sure.
And most importantly, at the end of the day, happier customers.
Happy customers. Now,
Happy
you mentioned
customer.
something you mentioned the network, right, and the importance of the network and connecting people. Can you? Why are these connections and collaborations important in supply chain?
Yeah, because supply chain is as fast as the weakest link in the chain.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
There's this notion of dragon boat racing. So if you put all of the rowers on the boat, it's going to go as fast as the slowest rower.
Right.
So it's really same analogy stands for supply chain. So that's why kind of bringing these things together, it's really important, right?
Okay.
To fully orchestrate and to achieve that end goal of happier customers.
And you talked about the network bringing in a lot of different data, data from a lot of different places, a lot of information, and the need for speed, right, is very important. But with all that data, getting through all that data, I would think would slow you down. So how do companies manage that? How do you manage that?
Yes, well, that's interesting, right? Data can come from anywhere, right? From a system, from a device, from a thing, right? From actually even social media, right?
Sure.
From like kind of trying to define or identify demand patterns. So the data has to be ingested.
Yep.
The data has to be normalized in a way, put in the context of the business process, and then, most importantly, it has to be used for something. It's like having an oil has to be refined. So all these data have to be refined, and of course that's where we come to the notion of machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Very nice.
Because we are a large community, if you have the data, you have to use the data in order to have competitive advantage at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And can you give like an example of where artificial intelligence, machine learning, intelligent supply chain, where that really makes a difference? Do you have a use case?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have a use case. So, for example, if you look at the supply chain, if you look at the fulfillment KPI, fulfillment rate, so essentially, will my supplier deliver to me what I'm expecting it to be, right? So in the past, it was very hard to have all the data and measure it because your supplier is dependent on their suppliers.
Okay.
So if you go back to this notion, well, let's have the data, right? So think that you have not the data about your own supplier. That's usually not so much a challenge, but what about the supplier's
sure,
right?
Absolutely.
And that's what you can do is start actually identifying early enough that there will be a disruption. You asked me for hundreds. There is the platform that can tell you, you know what, the likelihood of you receiving the 100 units of something is not very high, right? Because there may be a strike, there may be a financial difficulty of somebody who you don't even do business with.
Right.
That is the power we're talking about.
So artificial intelligence is able to sift through and find these kind of trigger points or these data points that would indicate that there's something they don't even know is happening in the supply chain.
Exactly. We can create supply chain graphs.
Okay.
And it does require a lot of data, but we do have the reach.
Okay.
That's essentially possible.
Okay. So we talk about artificial intelligence helping with that to some degree, but there's also the aspect of automation that you brought up. What would be some of the ways that we're automating the supply chain collaboration or supply chain process? Some examples of that.
Yeah, sure. Very good example would be in settlement, actually, right?
Okay.
So companies are trying to really automate this process. Essentially, if there is a really good match between a contracted rate for a product or service and we have a notion of knowing what was provided to us, what was delivered, and it can be confirmed, then the settlement kind of becomes an automated thing, really.
Okay.
And everybody stands to gain value, right? Suppliers may be paid sooner, and then the customers could actually take advantage of discounts that suppliers would give to them.
Okay. Now, when we talk about supply chain, right? It's not a horizontal thing. There's industries. There's very industry specifics in certain industries. Where are you seeing what we're doing resonating the most in what industries? What industries are really ripe for what you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. So we mentioned earlier, the supply chains are getting more global. So industries that really outsource a lot. For example, high-tech industry, almost entirely on one end, then going more towards the life science and pharma industry, kind of 50 to 70%, and then maybe to a lesser extent consumer products, but still somebody who is asking others to do something on their behalf, either entirely or just as a part of a kind of outsourced process. So that's where having the visibility into information and orchestrating the process. Again, at the end of the day, to serve the customer, to provide high service levels to customers. That's where these platforms really play a major part. Okay,
so we have customers looking into their supply chain. What do suppliers in the supply chain get out of this whole automation and interchange?
Yeah, well, suppliers are happy to serve their customers,
right?
So if their customers come to them and say, look, we're going to do business a little bit differently, and we are doing it because at the end of the day, it's going to help us, but it's going to help you because you'll have better visibility into what we are planning to do, what we are planning to execute on, and therefore, it's going to be beneficial for both of us, right?
Awesome. So planning becomes a lot easier, right?
Yes, fast, speed. Remember.
Cool. Speed. That's important. So now we've talked about what's going on in the world today, right? And where we're seeing the impact and where it's making a difference. Take a look into the future a little bit. What do you see? What do you see down the road? What's kind of maybe the next wave? What's the next movement in supply chain automation?
Yes, in supply chain automation. So I think supply chains will evolve to become networks of networks.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Yep.
So if you think about any given supply chain, think of them as like let's do this analogy very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The customer is the sun. So there are planets that go around the sun.
I think a lot of customers would like to hear that about themselves. That's
yes,
great.
yes. So really, the customer becomes the center of the universe. It's like a supply chain of one, of that customer that needs to be happy. We have to provide, the unique product for that customer or group of customers. So these supply chains, think of them as these communities, right? And they have to really work together. At the end of the day, turn around the customer, all of them.
Absolutely.
So the idea in the future in the supply chain would be how can we link those different communities, call them networks, that's perfectly fine, in order to really, again, be transparent with information, be transparent about demand signals, and make sure that at the end of the day, there's a functional universe.
A supply chain solar system.
Supply
I think a
chain
new
solar system.
product name right there.
There we go,
good.
exactly.
Excellent. So I think we're nearing our 5 minutes, maybe, but anything else you want to tell us about manufacturing supply chain where you're seeing really, really big movements in the world?
Well, I think we covered it pretty well. There's a lot of innovation.
There's a lot to happen.
It's actually probably one area where really there's we're just beginning. This is like kind of day zero. So stay tuned. It's an exciting space to be in. Yeah.
So one other question, right? So supply chain. There's where does SAP Ariba play in the process, right? We know that SAP, our parent company, has a lot of things going on with supply chain, and where do we play in the process and add the most value there?
Yeah, in the context of SAP Ariba, really we play in two areas. Essentially, one is in the area of really identifying the right sources of supply, right, and linking that to things like bill of materials, making sure we have the right terms and conditions and pricing captured. And we're talking here of volume, right? Something that's quite repetitive and really integrates well with a PLM, product lifecycle management systems on one hand, and on the other hand, we talked about this collaboration along the information signals that have to be exchanged in order to deliver a product to the customer, right? So that's the network part.
Excellent.
of it.
So SAP Ariba is into supply chain. Network's important, but you can think of it as SAP Ariba Supply Chain Solar Systems. I think I've just coined a new phrase.
Indeed. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.